The year was 2004 in Savannah, Georgia. A Hollywood film crew had arrived at one of the oldest estates in the region called Blackwood Manor. It was a place that looked normal from outside, but everyone who entered it felt something unusual in the air. Tammy Davis was only 12 years old when she came there with her family. Her father, Daniel Davis, was a businessman connected to the film industry. Her mother, Rachel Davis, was a calm and supportive woman. Her older sister, Emily Davis, had just been selected for a major Hollywood film produced by Victor Reynolds. For Emily, it felt like the biggest opportunity of her life. For Tammy, it felt like an exciting trip with her family. But none of them knew what was waiting inside that mansion. The film production was massive and involved shooting across multiple states, but the final and most important scenes were scheduled in Savannah, Georgia. When the crew arrived at Blackwood Manor, everyone noticed its strange silence. The mansion stood tall, surrounded by huge oak trees and hanging moss. Even in daylight, it looked strangely dark. Tammy stepped out of the vehicle and paused for a moment. She could not explain it, but the air around the mansion felt heavier than anywhere she had ever been before. Inside the mansion, the wooden floors creaked under every step. Long hallways stretched deeper into darkness, and old portraits lined the walls. The eyes in those portraits seemed to follow every movement of the crew. The hotel manager welcomed everyone and gave a very serious warning. If someone knocks on your door after midnight, do not open it under any condition unless you know exactly who it is. Some crew members laughed, thinking it was a joke for tourists, but the manager did not smile at all. Later that evening, Tammy walked with her family toward their assigned room on the upper floor. As she passed through the hallway, she noticed a painting of a young girl in a white dress. The painting was old and faded, but the eyes were still clear. Tammy stopped walking for a second because it felt like the girl inside the painting was looking directly at her. Rachel gently pulled her forward and they continued walking. But even after she left the painting behind, Tammy felt like something had followed her gaze. She just did not know what it was yet. The first night inside Blackwood Manor started like a normal filming schedule day. The crew was tired from travel and everyone quickly settled into their rooms after dinner. Tammy Davis stayed with her family in the upper floor section of the mansion, where several rooms were assigned to cast members and their families. The corridors outside were quiet and the entire building felt unusually still. Even the usual sounds of a busy film set had disappeared after midnight. Tammy lay on her bed, but she could not sleep easily. Something about the silence felt too deep, like the mansion was holding its breath. Around 1 a.m. Tammy heard something for the first time. A soft knock on the corridor door. At first she thought it was just someone from the crew, but then she remembered the warning from the hotel manager. If someone knocks after midnight, do not open the door. Tammy stayed still and listened. The knock came again, slow and steady, not loud but very intentional. Her heart started beating faster. She looked toward her parents, who were asleep in the same room. No one else seemed to notice anything. A few seconds later, the knocking stopped completely. The silence that followed felt even worse than the sound itself. Tammy slowly closed her eyes, hoping it was nothing. But then something changed. From outside the room, she heard footsteps. Very slow footsteps moving across the wooden floor, stopping directly outside their door. Tammy opened her eyes again. Now she was fully awake. She stared at the door without moving. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then another knock came. This time it was louder. Tammy instinctively grabbed her blanket tightly. Her breathing became uneven. She wanted to wake her parents, but fear stopped her. The room stayed silent again, and then suddenly the footsteps started moving away, slowly disappearing down the corridor. Tammy did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning the crew acted normal, as if nothing had happened. But Tammy noticed something strange. A few other people quietly mentioned hearing knocks at night. Some laughed it off. Some looked uncomfortable and changed the topic. But no one wanted to discuss it seriously. Later that day, filming continued inside different sections of the mansion. The atmosphere during the day felt normal again, almost like the night never happened. But Tammy kept thinking about the sound, that slow knock, that silence afterward, and the feeling that something had been standing right outside her door. That evening during a break, Tammy walked near the corridor again. She passed the same hallway where the old painting of the girl in white dress was hanging. But this time something was different. The painting looked slightly darker than before, like the eyes had become more defined. And for a brief moment, Tammy felt like the girl was not just inside the painting anymore. She was somewhere closer, watching, waiting. After the first night inside Blackwood Manor, the crew tried to act normal, but something had already changed in the atmosphere of the mansion. People were quieter than before, and even during daytime filming there was a strange tension in the air. Tammy Davis noticed it most clearly. It was not just fear. It felt like the house itself was aware of them. That evening, the production team prepared for another night shoot in one of the large halls of the mansion. The hall was decorated with old furniture and heavy wooden chairs that looked extremely ancient. During setup, one of the assistants joked that the chairs looked like they had not been moved in decades. No one laughed. While filming was about to start, Tammy was sitting near her mother, Rachel Davis, in a corner of the hall. Emily Davis was getting ready for her scene with the rest of the cast. Victor Reynolds was personally supervising the shoot. Everything looked professional and perfectly normal. Until something small changed. One of the heavy wooden chairs near the dining setup moved slightly on its own. At first, a crew member assumed someone had touched it, but then another chair shifted slightly in the opposite direction. The sound of wood scraping against the floor echoed through the hall. Everyone stopped for a second. A lighting technician walked over and adjusted the chairs again, thinking it was just poor placement. The shoot continued, but Tammy could not take her eyes off that corner of the room. She felt like something was sitting there even though no one was visible. During the break, Tammy quietly walked closer to the dining area. The hall was dimly lit now and most of the crew had moved to another setup. As she reached near the chairs, she suddenly stopped. All the chairs were now slightly misaligned again, not scattered completely, but arranged in a way that felt intentional, like someone had adjusted them while watching her. Tammy swallowed hard and slowly stepped back. That is when she heard it. A very soft sound of wood creaking, like someone was sitting down on one of the chairs, but there was no one there. She looked around quickly, but the hall was empty. Only silence remained. Tammy ran back to her mother without saying anything. That night, after returning to their room, everything felt heavier than before. Even the air inside the room felt cold. Around midnight, Tammy woke up again. This time there was no knocking, no footsteps, just silence. But something was wrong. She slowly turned her head toward the corner of the room, and she saw it. The painting of the girl in white dress from the hallway was now inside their room, standing against the wall. Even though no one had moved it, Tammy froze, completely unable to move or speak. The girl in the painting was no longer just an image. It felt like she had entered their space, and she was no longer waiting outside. She was inside, watching them. After seeing the painting inside their room, Tammy Davis could not understand what was happening around her. No one had brought it inside. No one had moved it, but it was clearly standing there against the wall like it belonged there. That night, Tammy did not sleep at all. She kept staring at the painting from her bed, waiting for something to happen. But the girl in the white dress did not move. She simply stared back in silence. The next morning, Rachel Davis noticed Tammy looked exhausted. She asked her if she was feeling okay. Tammy tried to explain what she saw but stopped halfway, because she already knew what answer she would get. No one would believe her. That day, filming continued in another section of Blackwood Manor. The production team tried to maintain normal routine, but the atmosphere inside the mansion was slowly becoming heavier. People were more irritated than usual, and small accidents kept happening on set. Lights flickering, equipment malfunctioning, and unexplained cold drafts passing through closed rooms. Victor Reynolds insisted everything was normal and blamed it on old building wiring. But deep down, even he seemed less confident than before. That evening, the crew was scheduled to shoot a family scene inside the main dining hall. Large wooden chairs had been arranged again in a perfect circle around the table. Tammy sat with her family off camera watching the setup. Emily was in costume preparing for her scene. As filming was about to begin, something strange happened again. One by one, the chairs started shifting slightly on their own. At first it looked like vibration from footsteps, but then the movement became more clear. A single chair slowly dragged backward across the wooden floor. No one was near it. The sound of scraping wood filled the entire hall. Everyone froze. A cameraman dropped his equipment in shock. Victor shouted for someone to check the wires or hidden mechanisms, but there were no machines near the chairs. Only empty space. Then suddenly all the chairs stopped moving. Complete silence returned. But the silence did not last long. From the far end of the dining hall, a single chair slowly turned by itself, facing directly toward Tammy. Even though she was sitting far away, it felt like it was looking at her specifically. Tammy felt her breath stop. She could not move or look away. And in that exact moment, she realized something terrifying. It was not just the mansion that was haunted. Something inside it had already chosen someone, and it was watching her closely. After the incident in the dining hall, the entire film crew stopped treating it like normal technical issues. The confidence that Victor Reynolds had been holding onto was slowly breaking. People started avoiding certain corridors inside Blackwood Manor, especially after sunset. Tammy Davis, however, could not avoid it, because whatever was happening seemed to follow her specifically. That night, filming was cancelled early due to multiple equipment failures and sudden power fluctuations across the mansion. The crew returned to their rooms much earlier than usual, but sleep did not come easily for anyone. Around 2 a.m. Tammy woke up suddenly. The room was completely dark except for faint moonlight coming through the window. At first everything felt normal, until she noticed something. The painting of the girl in white dress was no longer inside the room. Tammy slowly sat up confused. She looked around the room carefully. It was gone. For a moment she felt relieved, but that relief did not last long, because from outside the room she heard soft footsteps again, slow and steady, moving closer to their door. Tammy froze. She recognized the pattern now. It was the same movement she had heard on the first night. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. A long silence followed. Then came the knock. Slow, deliberate, like someone was waiting for permission. Tammy pulled the blanket tightly over herself. She wanted to wake her parents, but fear kept her silent. Another knock came, this time closer. The door handle slowly began to move, very slightly at first. Then again, as if someone was testing it. Tammy's heart started racing, and then suddenly everything stopped. No footsteps, no knocking, only silence. She stayed awake the entire night staring at the door. The next morning something strange happened. One of the crew members refused to come out of his room. When security finally opened the door, they found him sitting in the corner staring at the wall, completely unresponsive. He kept repeating one sentence. "She was in my room last night. She was standing right beside my bed." The crew tried to calm him down, but he refused to speak anything else. Victor ordered everyone to stay calm and continue filming, but the situation was clearly getting worse. That afternoon, Tammy walked through the corridor alone for the first time. She did not know why she was walking there. It felt like something was pulling her. When she reached near the staircase, she stopped. The same old painting was back on the wall, but this time something had changed. The girl inside it was no longer faded. Her face was now completely clear, and she was smiling directly at Tammy, as if she had been waiting for her to come back. After the painting appeared again in the corridor, Tammy Davis could no longer ignore the fact that something inside Blackwood Manor was directly connected to her. The smile on the girl's face was not normal anymore. It felt personal, like the painting was aware of who was looking at it. That evening, filming resumed again despite growing tension inside the crew. Victor Reynolds insisted that the schedule could not be delayed any further. But the atmosphere on set had completely changed. People were quieter and constantly looking over their shoulders. Even Emily Davis, who was usually confident, seemed unsettled. During the night shoot, the crew was once again in the large dining hall, the same room where the chairs had previously moved on their own. This time the setup felt heavier, as if the air itself was pressuring everyone inside. Tammy sat with her mother, Rachel Davis, near the edge of the hall. Daniel Davis was outside taking a call. Emily was on set preparing for a dialogue scene. As the cameras started rolling, everything appeared normal for the first few minutes. Then it began again. A faint scraping sound came from the center of the hall. One of the heavy wooden chairs moved slightly backward. Then another one shifted slowly to the side. The cameraman whispered that he was not moving the camera, but the frame was shaking slightly on its own. Victor tried to stop the shoot, but the sound continued to grow, slow and dragging across the floor. Then complete silence. Every chair in the hall turned at the same time, all of them facing the same direction, toward Tammy. She felt her body freeze. She could not breathe properly. It felt like every empty chair was looking at her at once. Then from the far end of the hall the lights flickered once, and in that single flicker Tammy saw something impossible. A girl in a white dress standing between the chairs, for less than a second, and then she was gone. The entire crew panicked immediately. Lights were turned back on. People rushed around checking equipment, but no one found anything. Victor ordered everyone to leave the hall immediately. That night filming was completely shut down early. Back in their room, Tammy could not stop thinking about what she saw. The girl was not just inside the painting anymore. She was moving through the mansion itself, and she was getting closer every time she appeared. Outside the room, footsteps started again, but this time they were not slow. They were closer, faster, and they stopped right in front of their door. No one inside dared to move. Then came the knock, but this time it was not just one knock. It was three, one after another. And after the third knock, the door handle slowly began to turn. The moment the door handle started turning inside Blackwood Manor, everything inside the room went completely silent. Tammy Davis could hear her own heartbeat louder than anything else. Rachel Davis immediately sat up in fear while Daniel Davis slowly moved toward the door. No one spoke. No one breathed properly. The handle stopped turning. For a few seconds there was complete silence outside. Then suddenly the footsteps started moving away. Slow, like someone had changed their mind. The tension inside the room did not disappear, but it loosened slightly. Daniel stepped back and locked the door properly. He told everyone to stay calm and not open the door no matter what happens. That night no one slept properly. Even the smallest sound made everyone sit up in fear. Around early morning the situation finally became quiet. When sunlight entered the room, everything looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. But Tammy knew it was not over, because now it was reacting differently. It was no longer just appearing randomly. It was testing them. That day the crew decided to continue filming despite the incidents. Victor Reynolds was under pressure from the studio and refused to delay the schedule further. Filming was shifted to another section of the mansion near the staircase corridor. Tammy stayed close to her family the entire time, but something inside her kept pulling her attention toward the upper floor corridor, the same corridor where the painting used to appear. During a short break, Tammy slowly walked toward that area again without telling anyone. The corridor was empty, but the air felt different, heavier, like something was already standing there before she arrived. She stopped near the wall where the painting had been seen multiple times. This time there was nothing hanging there, only an empty space on the wall. Tammy stared at it for a moment, and then she noticed something strange. Faint marks on the wall, like something had been removed recently. She slowly reached out her hand toward the wall, but before she could touch it she heard a voice behind her, very soft, almost like a whisper. She turned back immediately. No one was there, but the temperature in the corridor had dropped suddenly, and from the empty wall space she saw something forming again, slowly, like a stain becoming an image. The outline of the girl in the white dress was coming back, without a frame, without a painting, just forming directly on the wall itself. And this time, it was not watching her. It was stepping out toward her. Tammy Davis stood frozen in the corridor as the image on the wall continued to form itself. The outline of the girl in the white dress was no longer just a shape. It was becoming something real, like the wall itself was turning into a doorway. Tammy wanted to run, but her body refused to move. Her breathing became shallow as she watched the figure slowly gain detail. The face became clearer, the hair became darker, and the eyes slowly opened. At that exact moment, the entire corridor light flickered once, and when it came back, the figure was gone from the wall. But Tammy was not alone anymore. She could feel it, right behind her. She slowly turned her head. Nothing was there, but she could still feel a presence standing extremely close, as if someone was breathing just inches away from her shoulder. Suddenly a soft voice whispered her name, Tammy. She stepped back instantly and ran toward the staircase. Her heart was racing and footsteps echoed behind her even though she could not see anyone. She reached the lower floor where the crew was working and immediately grabbed Rachel Davis's hand. She tried to explain everything, but her voice was shaking too much to make sense. Rachel looked worried but tried to calm her down. Daniel Davis arrived a few seconds later and asked what happened. Before Tammy could answer, one of the crew members shouted from the hallway. The entire set paused. A camera assistant pointed toward the upper corridor and said that all the lights up there had turned off at once. Victor Reynolds ordered two crew members to check the power system. They walked up slowly with flashlights. Everyone waited in silence. After a few minutes, a loud sound echoed through the mansion. A wooden chair dragging across the floor from the upper corridor. Then another sound followed, like multiple chairs moving at the same time. Suddenly one of the crew members came running down the stairs completely pale. He kept repeating the same thing. There is someone sitting there. All the chairs are facing me, and she is smiling. The entire crew panicked immediately and filming was shut down for the day. That night no one was allowed to stay in the upper floor anymore. Everyone gathered on the lower level trying to stay together. Tammy sat between her parents, but she could not stop thinking about what she saw. The girl was no longer trapped in paintings or walls. She was moving freely inside the mansion, and now she knew Tammy could see her. Around midnight the lights suddenly went out across the entire building. Complete darkness filled Blackwood Manor, and in that darkness, a soft whisper came from the center of the room, right next to Tammy. I am already here. The moment the whisper came inside the dark room, everything froze. No one moved. No one even breathed properly. Tammy Davis felt like the voice was coming from inside her own ear, but at the same time it felt like it was coming from everywhere in the room. Daniel Davis immediately turned on his phone flashlight and pointed it around the room. The light slowly moved across the faces of everyone gathered there. Rachel Davis was holding Tammy tightly. Emily Davis was sitting silently, unable to speak. The crew members were standing near the corners trying to stay calm, but there was nothing visible in the light, only empty space. Victor Reynolds ordered everyone to stay together and not split up under any condition. The generators were checked, but the power system of Blackwood Manor had completely failed. It was as if the entire mansion had shut itself off. Outside the windows, the trees were moving even though there was no strong wind. And then it started again. A soft knocking sound. Not on the main door this time, but inside the room itself, from the wooden walls. One knock, then a pause, then another knock from a different direction. The sound moved around the room like it was circling them. Tammy closed her eyes tightly, but the sound still felt closer every second. Suddenly, one of the crew members screamed. He pointed toward the dining hall entrance. In the faint light, everyone saw it. All the chairs from the dining hall were now inside the main room, perfectly arranged in a circle, all facing inward toward the family. And in one of those chairs, something was sitting, but it was impossible to see clearly. Just a dark shape, with the faint outline of a girl in a white dress. The room erupted into panic. People started moving backward trying to find exits, but every door they reached was suddenly locked from the outside. Daniel Davis pushed against the main door with full force, but it would not open. The knocking sound stopped completely, and complete silence returned again. The dark shape in the chair slowly tilted its head, and this time the whisper came clearly. Not from the walls, not from the room, but directly behind Tammy. "You finally looked at me." Tammy turned around slowly, and what she saw made her completely lose her breath. The girl was standing right behind her mother, Rachel Davis. For a few seconds no one moved after seeing the girl standing right behind Rachel Davis. The entire room felt like it had stopped existing. Tammy Davis could not even scream. Rachel was standing completely still, as if she could feel something behind her but did not have the courage to turn around. Daniel Davis slowly raised his hand trying to pull Rachel away. But before he could reach her, the lights flickered once again, and in that single flicker the girl disappeared from behind Rachel. But she was not gone, because the moment the light came back she was now sitting in the chair inside the circle, exactly where the dark shape had been seen earlier. Her head slowly lifted, and for the first time everyone could clearly see her face. It was not human anymore. It looked old and pale but alive at the same time, like it had been waiting for a long time just to be seen properly. Victor Reynolds finally shouted for everyone to move toward the exit, but every door was still locked. The mansion felt completely sealed from the outside world. Tammy suddenly felt a strange pressure in her chest, like something was pulling her attention back to the girl in the chair. The girl smiled, very softly, and then spoke again, this time not just to Tammy, but to everyone in the room. "You brought me here again." The crew members started banging on the doors, screaming for help. Daniel Davis tried to stay calm and protect his family. Rachel held Tammy tightly, trying to cover her eyes, but Tammy could not look away anymore. Her fear had turned into something else, something heavier. The girl slowly stood up from the chair, and as she stood up, all the other chairs in the room began to shift slightly on their own. Slow scraping sounds filled the air again. Then suddenly every chair turned toward Tammy at the same time. Not the group, only her. The girl tilted her head and took one slow step forward. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply that everyone could see their breath. Victor Reynolds suddenly shouted that they needed to break a window. But before anyone could move, the girl raised her hand slightly, and everything stopped again. No movement, no sound. Even the crew members mid-scream were frozen in place. Only Tammy was still able to move. The girl looked directly into her eyes and whispered, "You are the only one who never closed the door on me." Tammy's breathing became uneven as she realized something terrifying. She had not been chosen by accident. She had been the one allowing it in all along. And now there was no way to stop it anymore. Everything in the room was frozen except Tammy Davis and the girl in the white dress. Tammy's mind was racing, but her body still felt locked in fear. The girl took another slow step forward, and the air around her seemed to get heavier with every movement. The frozen crew members stood exactly where they were, as if time itself had stopped for them. The girl tilted her head slightly and looked at Tammy with a calm expression that felt more disturbing than anger. She whispered again, "You were the first one who saw me clearly." Tammy tried to step back, but her legs refused to respond properly. It felt like something was holding her in place without touching her. The girl slowly raised her hand and pointed toward the painting on the wall that had been empty until now. In front of everyone's eyes, the painting began to reappear again. But this time it was not just a picture. It was expanding across the wall like a living shadow spreading. The girl spoke softly again. "This place remembers me because I never left it." Suddenly the frozen effect broke for a second, and the crew members gasped for air as if they had been released from pressure. But the relief did not last long, because the girl clapped her hands once, and the sound echoed through the entire mansion. Instantly everything went silent again, but now only half the people were frozen. The rest were able to move, but they were terrified and disoriented. Victor Reynolds shouted that they needed to escape immediately. Daniel Davis grabbed Rachel and tried to push toward the exit, but the doors were still sealed. Tammy suddenly felt an overwhelming pull toward the girl, like something inside her was being called forward. Step by step she started walking without realizing it. Rachel screamed for her to stop, but Tammy could not hear her properly anymore. The world around her felt distant. The girl smiled again and slowly turned around, as if leading Tammy somewhere. The dining chairs in the room began moving again, but this time they were not chaotic. They were forming a path, a straight line leading toward the corridor outside the room. The girl began walking toward it and Tammy followed without control. Behind them the crew was still panicking, trying to break the doors. But Tammy was already crossing into the hallway. The same hallway where everything had started. As she reached the corridor, the lights above flickered one by one, and every portrait on the wall now showed the same face. The girl in the white dress, all of them watching Tammy move forward. The girl stopped at the center of the corridor and whispered without turning back, "Now you belong to the place where I was left behind." Tammy stood just a few steps away from her, and for the first time she felt not fear, but acceptance, like something inside her had already decided to stay. Tammy Davis stood in the middle of the corridor staring at the girl in the white dress. The entire mansion felt silent again, but this silence was different. It was not empty. It felt full of something unseen. The girl slowly turned her head and looked at Tammy with a calm expression. No anger, no fear, only patience, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. Behind Tammy, the crew was still struggling inside the sealed room. Daniel Davis was banging on the door trying to break through while Rachel screamed for Tammy to come back. But their voices felt distant, almost like they were coming from another world. The girl raised her hand and gently pointed toward the end of the corridor. And for the first time Tammy noticed something she had never seen before. A hidden door in the wall. Old wooden panels that blended perfectly with the mansion structure. The door slowly began to open on its own. No sound, no force, just a quiet invitation. The girl started walking toward it without looking back. Tammy followed step by step without fully understanding why. Every instinct in her body told her to stop, but something deeper kept pulling her forward. As she reached the doorway, she saw inside a dark room filled with broken furniture and old dust-covered objects. But in the center of the room was something that made her stop completely. It was the same painting. The girl in the white dress, but now it was not hanging. It was standing upright like a mirror. The girl finally spoke again in a soft voice. "This is where I was left when they all forgot me." Tammy felt a sharp pain in her chest as memories that did not belong to her flashed in her mind. A room, a scream, a locked door, and silence that lasted too long. She stepped back in fear, but the girl took one step closer and whispered, "You did not forget me like the others did. That is why I chose you." Suddenly the corridor behind Tammy began to collapse into darkness. The sounds of the crew shouting faded completely. Even the mansion itself felt like it was disappearing. Only the girl and Tammy remained in the space between light and darkness. The girl extended her hand toward Tammy, and for the first time it felt like a choice was being given. Not an attack, not a trap, but an invitation. To stay? Forever. Tammy Davis stared at the girl's hand for several seconds. The entire space around her felt unreal. Like the mansion had stopped being a physical place and had turned into something between memory and nightmare. The girl in the white dress stood calmly waiting. Not forcing, not rushing, just watching. Tammy slowly looked back toward the corridor behind her. The voices of her parents and the crew were almost gone now. Only faint echoes remained, as if they were trapped behind a wall of distance that could not be crossed anymore. Daniel Davis was still shouting her name, but it sounded broken and far away. Rachel Davis was crying, but even that sound was fading. Tammy turned forward again. The girl spoke softly. "You do not have to be afraid anymore." Tammy felt her breathing slow down, not because she was calm, but because something inside her was changing. The fear that had controlled her for so long was being replaced by something else. Confusion, then understanding. The girl took one step closer and the air around Tammy became strangely warm. Not like fire, but like recognition, as if the place itself was remembering her. Tammy whispered without realizing, "What do you want from me?" The girl tilted her head slightly and replied, "I do not want anything from you. I only want you to remember me." Suddenly flashes of images appeared in Tammy's mind. A smaller version of the mansion, laughter that suddenly stopped, a locked room, and a girl sitting alone waiting for someone to open the door. Tammy stumbled backward holding her head. The memories felt wide but familiar at the same time, like something buried deep inside her was waking up. The girl stepped forward again and placed her hand gently near Tammy's chest without touching her. And in that moment everything became clear. Tammy was not just seeing her. She had always been connected to her. The mansion was not choosing her now. It was recognizing her. As the final truth settled in the corridor, the lights above flickered one last time. And the girl whispered, "Welcome back." The moment the girl whispered "Welcome back," the entire corridor went completely still. Even the faint remaining echoes of the crew outside disappeared, as if the mansion had cut them off from existence. Tammy Davis stood frozen, trying to understand what she had just heard. Her mind was fighting between fear and something deeper that she could not explain. The girl in the white dress slowly stepped closer again, but this time her expression was no longer cold or distant. It almost looked familiar, like she had finally reached something she had been searching for. Tammy shook her head, trying to break the strange pull she was feeling. This is not real. This is not happening. But even as she said it, the mansion around her seemed to respond. The walls felt closer, the air heavier, the silence more alive. The girl spoke again in a soft voice. "You left this place a long time ago, but you always came back in your dreams." Tammy stepped back instantly. Her heartbeat rose again as confusion turned into panic. She tried to remember her childhood clearly, but everything felt blurred. The girl raised her hand and the corridor behind Tammy slowly began to change. The wooden walls started looking older, more damaged, like time itself was reversing. And then she saw it, not as Tammy Davis, but as something else, a memory, a younger version of herself standing inside the same mansion years ago. A door closing, a scream fading, and then silence. Tammy gasped and fell to her knees. The truth she could not accept was slowly forming inside her mind. The girl was not just haunting the mansion, she was connected to it, and connected to Tammy in a way she was never prepared to understand. The girl knelt down in front of her and gently said, "You did not forget me. They made you forget me." Tammy looked up slowly, her eyes shaking, and for the first time she whispered something back. "Who are you?" The girl smiled faintly and replied, "I am the part of you that never left this place." The corridor lights flickered again, and this time the mansion did not feel like a location anymore. It felt like a memory that had been reopened, and Tammy was standing right inside it. Tammy Davis stayed on her knees in the middle of the corridor as the words of the girl echoed inside her mind. "I am the part of you that never left this place." Everything around her felt unstable, like reality itself was breaking apart. The mansion walls continued to shift slightly, as if reacting to every breath she took. The girl in the white dress slowly stood up again and looked toward the end of the corridor. This time she did not move closer. Instead she waited, as if something final was about to happen. Tammy slowly lifted her head. Her breathing was uneven, but her eyes were now fixed on the girl without blinking. Behind her, the faint sounds of her parents and the crew had completely disappeared. It felt like she was the only living person left inside Blackwood Manor. The girl finally spoke again. "They brought you here thinking it was just a film. But this place never forgets who enters it." Tammy whispered weakly, "What happened to me before?" The girl paused for a moment, and for the first time her voice sounded different, sadder. "You were not supposed to stay, but you saw what they did not want anyone to see." The corridor lights flickered violently, and suddenly Tammy saw it again. Not as a dream this time, but clearer than before. A night years ago. A younger Tammy standing near the same hallway. A locked door shaking. Voices begging for help from inside. And then silence. Her hands went to her head as the memories became stronger. The girl stepped closer and continued, "You never truly left. Only your mind did." Tammy shook her head in denial, but the images kept coming. The mansion was not just a filming location. It was the place where something had been buried, and she had seen it. "That is why you always felt it calling you back." The girl extended her hand again, but this time it did not feel like an invitation. It felt like completion, as if everything was finally returning to its original place. Tammy looked at her hand, trembling, and in that moment she realized there was no escape left. Not from the mansion, and not from the truth. Tammy Davis slowly looked at the girl's extended hand. Her mind was no longer fighting as strongly as before. The memories inside her head were becoming clearer with every passing second. The mansion was not just a place she had entered. It was something she had already lived through once before. The girl in the white dress stood still, waiting patiently. No pressure, no force, only silence that felt heavier than any sound. Tammy whispered again, "If I take your hand, what happens?" The girl's expression softened slightly, and she replied, "You will stop forgetting me." The corridor behind Tammy began to darken further, as if the world outside this moment was slowly shutting itself down. Even the faint memory of her parents and the crew had completely vanished now. There was nothing left behind her, only forward, only the girl. Tammy's hand trembled as she lifted it slowly. Her fingers hovered in the air between fear and acceptance. Inside her mind, flashes continued. A door, a scream, a shadow being pulled away, and then her own voice crying out, but no one responding. Tears filled her eyes without her fully understanding why. The girl stepped a little closer and spoke gently. You do not have to suffer alone anymore. Tammy closed her eyes tightly for a moment, and when she opened them again something inside her had changed. Not completely, but enough. She lowered her hand slightly, almost touching the girl's hand now. The air around them became completely still. No wind, no sound, no movement, just the moment before something irreversible. The girl whispered one last time, come back to where it began. And Tammy finally placed her hand forward, right into the girl's hand. The instant their hands touched, the entire mansion went completely dark, and everything stopped. The moment Tammy Davis touched the girl's hand, everything around her disappeared into complete darkness. No corridor, no mansion, no voices, not even silence. It felt like she had fallen outside of reality itself. For a few seconds there was nothing except her own breathing. Then slowly a faint light began to form in front of her. Not bright, not warm, just enough to show shapes. Tammy found herself standing in the same corridor again, but everything looked different. The walls were old and broken, the lights were hanging loosely, and the air felt heavy with dust and time. The girl in the white dress was still standing in front of her, but now she looked less like a haunting presence, and more like a memory that had finally been unlocked. Tammy stepped back slightly, trying to understand where she was. The girl spoke softly. You are seeing it now, not what they showed you, but what really happened. Suddenly the corridor around them shifted again, and Tammy saw flashes of the past unfolding like scenes playing over reality. A group of people inside the mansion many years ago. A young girl trapped in a locked room. Voices arguing outside the door. Someone refusing to open it. And then silence that lasted too long. Tammy's chest tightened as she watched everything. She realized the truth was not about ghosts or fear. It was about something that had been forgotten and buried inside the place. The girl slowly walked forward and continued, I was left here, not gone, just forgotten. Tammy's voice shook as she asked, why me? The girl stopped and looked directly into her eyes. Because you saw what they tried to erase, and you never fully left either. The corridor began to break apart again, walls fading in and out like unstable images, the past and present merging together. Tammy fell to her knees again, holding her head as emotions and memories collided inside her. The girl knelt in front of her and gently placed her hand near Tammy's forehead. And everything became quiet. This time not dark, but still, as if the truth had finally been accepted by both of them. The girl whispered one last line, now you remember, and the light slowly faded again. The silence slowly faded and Tammy Davis opened her eyes again. But this time she was no longer in the corridor or the broken version of the mansion. She was standing inside a completely quiet, empty room. No furniture, no windows, only a single door in front of her. The girl in the white dress was still there, but now she looked calmer than before, almost peaceful. Tammy looked around in confusion. Her voice came out weak. Where am I now? The girl replied softly, where it all ended. Tammy walked slowly toward the door but did not open it. Her mind was still trying to process everything she had seen. The memories were no longer flashes. They were becoming complete scenes now. A night inside the mansion, a group of people arguing, a locked room being ignored, and a child crying behind the door. Tammy closed her eyes as the truth finally became clear. She was not just seeing the past, she was remembering it. Her own voice echoed inside her head from long ago. But no one opened the door. The girl stepped beside her and said, you were there, you saw it happen. And then your mind broke it into silence so you could survive. Tammy's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, so it was never a ghost. The girl shook her head slightly. Number. It was always memory. A heavy silence filled the empty room. Tammy slowly turned back toward the door in front of her. Her hand reached for it, but stopped halfway. The girl spoke one final time. If you open it now, you will remember everything completely, even what you buried inside yourself. Tammy stood still for a long moment, torn between fear and truth. Then finally she placed her hand on the door handle. The entire space around her began to tremble slightly, as if reality itself was holding its breath. And then slowly, she turned the handle. The moment Tammy Davis turned the handle, the door did not open like a normal door. It opened like a memory breaking apart. A sharp flash of light hit her eyes and she stumbled forward into darkness again. But this darkness was different. It was not empty. It was full of voices, soft crying, distant shouting, and the sound of a door being banged from the other side. Tammy fell to her knees holding her head as everything started coming back at once. Not fragments anymore. Complete reality. She saw it clearly now. Blackwood Manor years ago. A smaller version of the mansion filled with people, and a locked room at the end of the corridor. Inside that room a young girl was trapped, calling for help, her voice growing weaker with every second. Tammy was there, standing outside the door, watching everything happen. She turned to the adults in the corridor, begging them to open it, but they refused, saying it was not important, just noise, just confusion. The girls' cries slowly stopped, and then silence, a silence that never left the place again. Tammy screamed as the memory hit her fully. No, I tried to stop it. The girl in the white dress appeared beside her again, but now she was no longer smiling. She looked real, not supernatural, just a child who had been left behind. She spoke softly. You did try, but they made you forget so you would not break completely. Tammy looked at her with shaking eyes. Then what am I now? The girl stepped closer and replied, you are the one who finally came back to finish what was left unfinished. The entire memory space around them began to collapse again, walls fading into darkness, voices disappearing one by one, until only the two of them remained in a fading corridor. The girl extended her hand one last time, but this time it was different, not to take her, not to trap her, but to end it. Tammy slowly reached forward, and as their fingers touched, a final sound echoed through everything, a door finally opening after many years. The sound of the door opening echoed through everything like a final release after years of silence. Tammy Davis felt a strange weight lift from her chest as her hand stayed connected with the girl for a moment longer. Then slowly the surrounding darkness began to dissolve, not suddenly, but gently, like a memory finally being accepted instead of avoided. The corridor returned, not broken this time, but calm and empty. Blackwood Manor was no longer shifting or collapsing. It felt still. The girl in the white dress stood in front of Tammy for the last time, but her expression was no longer painful. It was peaceful, as if something long unfinished had finally been understood. Tammy's voice was barely a whisper. Is it over now? The girl nodded slowly. Yes, but not because I disappeared. Because you remembered. A soft breeze moved through the corridor even though all windows were closed. The light above them slowly brightened for the first time. Not harsh, just warm. The girl began to fade slowly from the edges first, like dust returning to air. Tammy stepped forward instinctively. Wait, but the girl raised her hand gently, stopping her. You don't need to follow me anymore. Tammy's eyes filled with tears, but she did not feel fear now, only sadness and acceptance. The girl spoke one final time. I was never waiting for you to save me. I was waiting for you to remember that I was never meant to be forgotten. And with those words, she slowly disappeared completely. No scream, no darkness, only silence. The mansion around Tammy felt real again. Stable, alive. A few seconds later, distant voices returned. Her father calling her name, her mother crying in relief, the crew shouting from somewhere far away. The real world was coming back. Tammy walked slowly toward the sound of her family. As she reached the exit of Blackwood Manor, the sunlight outside hit her face, warm and real. Behind her, the mansion stood quiet, no longer haunted, just old, just forgotten by time. Tammy looked back one last time, then whispered softly, goodbye, and walked forward into the light. So this is the story. Follow Nightmare Files for more. Like, share, and subscribe.